In this video, we're going to cover a few of the string methods. We've already covered string interpolation, we've already covered multi-line strings, but there are a few other topics that they bring up. We won't be covering the advanced string functions. Some of them require arrays. We haven't studied collections yet. We'll be looking at them next week. So we may kind of delay and look at some of those advanced string functions later after we have covered arrays and after we have covered guards, because they also take into account some of the guards as well. Now, if we continue on here, the very first thing that they talk about is if we have a need to provide some type of a double quote or a single quote or tab, backslash, or new line within a particular string, we need to escape those particular characters. Like in the case of the double quote, if I want to put it within the context of a string, we have to use the backslash, which is considered the escape, before we can actually put a double quote within a quoted string. If we did this, then it would show us my name is, and then double quotes around Jenny. That would be what would be printed out in the text. We also have a number of functions, and we're going to take a look at some examples here. We have the isEmpty, so this is going to interrogate the string to determine whether it contains anything. If it doesn't contain any characters or numbers or any type of data and it's empty, then it will return true. The uppercase will convert a string into all uppercase letters. The lowercase is converting all of the letters within a string to lowercase. We have the has prefix that's basically looking at the beginning of a string to determine whether a string that's provided, which would be a substring of that string, exists at the very front of the string versus whether it has that suffix. Does that substring exist at the very end of the string? And then we also have the contains, which basically looks to see if that substring is contained anywhere within the actual string itself. So it could be located not at the start, not at the beginning, but somewhere in the middle. Could be at the beginning, could be at the end, just has to be somewhere there. So let's go ahead and let's get into Xcode. So I'm going to bring up a terminal window, get changed into my folder that I'm using, and this is my lovely junk folder, and I'm going to go ahead and touch and create a string.swift and open this file. I'm going to bring it over here. Now, one of the very first things, and I'm going to get rid of this. So I want to start by defining a couple variables that we can play with. The first one's going to be var title, make this a string, and set this equal to how to program in Swift. The second one, I'm going to make a name and initially just set it to Fred. If I go ahead and I print out my name in uppercase, and since this is a method, it needs the parentheses, I can also go ahead and print out the name in lowercase. And if I save this now and run it, I see Fred in uppercase, I see Fred in lowercase. So that's pretty logical about what those particular functions are doing. Now, if I have something where I want to check to see whether the title has a specific suffix, and maybe in this case I'm looking for, let's change this to uppercase here, And I'm going to use a ternary operation, set message, define it as a string, and set it equal to title.has suffix. Again, this is a method, so we need our parentheses, and we're going to be checking for Swift. If it's found, then we're going to say that it has a suffix. Otherwise, it has no suffix. And we're going to print out that message. If we go ahead and save this and try rerunning it, we see that it has no suffix because Swift is case sensitive. Swift is case sensitive. Here we have Swift in all capitals. Here we have Swift in title case. So unfortunately, that's not a match. But what can we do to actually check to see whether it had the word? Because maybe we're just concerned that it has the word and we don't necessarily care what case it is. We can also go through, and I'm just going to copy this and modify it. So getting rid of this, and then of course this here. I could potentially go ahead and say maybe my title, before I do my has suffix, I want to do a lowercase and convert everything to lowercase, and then check to see whether the suffix here is also lowercase. So each term is going to be converted to the same case and the comparison done to determine if that particular word is in there. So when I do it this time, I should see that I have it coming out where it has the suffix. So if I go ahead and save this and go back, the first one has no suffix, the second one has a suffix. Now if I decide to go in here and change this to have more text within it, maybe volume 2, my has suffix is not going to work. Okay, so in both cases I should now see that I have no suffix. But if I go ahead here and copy this, I now, instead of using the has suffix, I want to try the contains. So I can say contains, and I can see whether it has Swift or no Swift. And if I save, I can re-execute this and see that it has Swift. So that contains is finding that Swift using the case insensitive, and I could make this uppercase instead of lowercase. It doesn't really matter. And I think the last thing that we want to take a look at is maybe we want to have a message that's printed out to the screen that's going to prompt the user for entry of their name, and we're just going to reuse that name field, and the entry must be at least 3 characters. So this is the message that we're putting out. We're going to add the terminator to keep the cursor from advancing to the next line. For our input that we're reading in, we're going to set name equal to what we're reading from the console and forcing it, because if somebody has no entry that they're making, they just hit return and it's not going to have a value. You want to be able to handle that. We'll learn a little better next week how to deal with that. But for right now, we can use the exclamation after, and I can go through then and then use the name dot is empty method, or in this case name dot count to determine if it's less than 3. Maybe I want to go ahead and write out a message that says your name doesn't have enough characters, or it's not long enough, or something to that effect. Let's go with is not long enough. So if I go ahead and save this now, and run it, waiting for entry. If I just hit enter, we see that it's not long enough. If we rerun it and I enter 2 letters, it's not long enough. If I go ahead and enter 3 letters, it finally is long enough. I'm not getting that final message. And this is a really quick walkthrough on some of these string functions. Some of them have a lot of power, and especially when we get into string comparisons, we always want to make sure that we convert something to the same case so that we will find whether it really is there or not using either the has prefix, have suffix, or the contains. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.